Hi there, my name is Casey-Bolanos, and I'm going to be giving my spring presentation for Gender and Women's Studies 338 on transgender rights. I'm going to be discussing two articles, one by the Washington Post and the other by the New York Times, about Title IX within school districts, and then also about a transgender NCAA champion of recent. The first article is called Leah Thomas Wins NCAA Championship. A little background is Leah is a transgender woman converting from man to woman and is competing for the University of Pennsylvania women's swimming team. In the bottom right photo, you can kind of see a lot of the reaction to her transitioning and being so successful, with her being left out of a championship photo on the podium. So some of the main points of this article is that Leah Thomas, the transgender athlete competing at the University of Pennsylvania, began hormone therapy in 2019 after completing that full season as a male. She then let her teammates know that she was going to be transitioning from male to female and was given total support by the university and the Ivy League as a whole. Part of the reason that this is pretty controversial is because as a male, she was dominant. She was a Ivy League runner-up in both the 500 and the mile. And then this year, after 2 years of hormone therapy, she was an Ivy League champion in all three events of the 100 free, 200 free, and 500 free, and then an NCAA champion in the 500 freestyle. Additionally, the NCAA is deciding to follow each sport's national governing body within the issue of transgender athlete participation. So what this means is organizations like USA Swimming are going to be in control of choosing the regulations for transgender athletes to compete. So as we learned through the article, is the NCAA is claiming to be in total support, but unfortunately the NCAA and USA Swimming are implementing stricter guidelines for transgender athletes. The NCAA will not be having these restrictions until the next season, so the 2022-2023 season, but USA Swimming is having these regulations effective immediately. So there is the World Championship trials this upcoming week, and transgender athletes will not be able to compete in their desired gender and what they represent themselves as for their sexual orientation. Additionally, the article discussed that most changes do happen within the first year of hormone suppression, so Leah Thomas's hormones should be pretty regular based after the first year, but unfortunately, a lot of the women can retain the muscle mass, which is where a lot of the controversy is coming from. Because Leah Thomas has bigger feet, bigger hands, is taller, and has more muscle mass than a lot of these women. So people are thinking that is unfair for her to compete with the women. So why this is relevant to our class is because of the issue that it has to do with discrimination of transgender people. In both the cases that we read really recently with Contreras and then Shower and v. Billington, both these court cases showed us discrimination, whether in custody battles in marriage or in seeking a job. This article brings up a lot of the same issues that got brought up in both of those court cases, which is going to be Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and how people that are transgender or gay have been treated. And while it was never explicitly stated in that title and in that act that these people are supposed to be covered under this, they have been based on previous court proceedings, such as Contreras versus Contreras and then Schroer versus Billington. And then also recently in class, we've been discussing the discrimination of people and people based on their race, or kind of such with the virginity testing of the Asian women or the drug testing of mainly women of color. And so simply because of someone's race, religion, or sex or sexual orientation, a lot of people are being discriminated against, even with this Title VII in place. Unfortunately, there is going to be a lot bigger spotlight on those who are deemed as the minority. So in this case, transgender women in sports, or in some of those other cases with the Asian American women, or not Asian American, but Asian women with their virginity testing, and then the drug testing with a lot of people, a lot of ladies of color. So even with these previous cases setting precedents, there's still going to be a lot of people that are going to be upset about Leah competing because it is quote unquote unfair because of her muscle mass retention, her feet size, her hand size, the fact that she is 6'4", and she was a man before her transition, and let alone she was a man that was able to compete nationally and at a very high level. Like, luckily, kind of where we've been going, even though there has been a lot of hate with it, because of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and Title VII, a lot of the discrimination has been able to been handled a lot better, and making sure that there is a lot less hate through these precedents. So the next article that we're going to be talking about is from the Washington Post, and it's called New Title IX Rules Set to Assert Rights of Transgender Students. So the main points of the article is that there's going to be a new federal civil rights law that's being proposed that makes discrimination of transgender students a violation of Title IX. Unfortunately, Title IX did not explicitly state that it protected transgender and gay students, but with this new regulation, it should be covering these students and providing them a safe environment. Unfortunately, in 12 states that did pass laws that transgender girls are not allowed to compete in sports. But with this new provision, it should allow for these transgender women to participate in sports in the K through 12 years. Unfortunately, though, with kind of staying on the subject of sports, a lot of people have expressed their unhappiness for trans women participating in sports, as we saw with the last article with Leah Thomas, but then also ex-world champion sprinter Sithis Montalone said, and I quote, "My daughter trained for 2 years for her first race. This transgender athlete trained for track for 2 weeks. How can I continue to teach this hard work when quite literally average boys can change their identity and beat the top females in the competition?" Additionally, the chief executive for the Trevor Project, which is a project that is prevention of suicide, especially with the LGBT community, said, "By ensuring that the LGBT community young people have access to welcoming and affirming school environment, the Department of Education can improve student mental health and well-being and ultimately save lives." What they meant by this is by having a safe environment for LGBTQ students, it makes it a lot easier and gives them a space where they can actually feel welcome in an environment where they often do not feel welcome. And then the last thing is that there have been different presidential offices that have determined different terms and guidelines for sexual violence regarding transgender members. The Obama administration had initially set a set of guidelines, but then when the Trump administration came in, Betsy DeVos, the Secretary of Education, then changed those guidelines to be a lot more strict. But then with the new Biden administration, they created a set of guidelines that were a lot more lenient, a lot more representative of transgender individuals and transgender students, particularly. So how this is relevant to class is similar to the last article and similar to the cases that we have been studying on transgender rights, such Contreras and then Schroer versus Billington, because it deals with issues of discrimination within the transgender community. So this goes back to the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and Title VII of that, which again is no discrimination based on race, religion, or sex. Title IX states that it bars discrimination on the basis of sex in any educational program or activity that is receiving federal money from the state government or from the federal government. So Title IX is pretty similar to Title VII because they both have a different section, but are broadly talking about discrimination of sex and other categories as well. Often when Title IX cases arise, they will follow suit from Title VII cases, and Title VII cases can often follow from Title IX as well. One of the good things, though, is in 2020, the Supreme Court did rule that Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 will now protect gay and transgender workers from employment discrimination. So what this means is going into more of an educational system, that there will probably be a lot less, hopefully, discrimination within the classroom, within the university system for transgender individuals. And then one last point is that it really furthers and backs up cases such as Contreras versus Contreras and Schroer versus Billington because of the furthering the rights of transgendered individuals. Both those cases had precedents that were set that then paved the way for a lot of other cases and also for making decisions based on these acts and these provisions. And they were all supported by both Title VII and Title IX, which are all based on discrimination and making sure that discrimination is not going to be possible. And then here are the citations. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed.